By April 2016, childhood sweethearts Brian and Leslie Jenkins had been married for 42 years. Brian worked selling industrial chemicals, and Leslie was originally a school teacher before making the switch to mental health services. Together, they had two children, Mason and Jennifer. There really isn't much about the Jenkins that couldn't be described as completely and totally what society considers normal. Jennifer was a bright and cheery child who grew up to have lots of friends, and in every picture that I've seen of her, she is smiling. Mason and Jennifer grew up close to each other, and other than the normal sibling rivalries, who got the bigger piece of pie kind of thing, their relationship was close and they were mutually respectful of each other. At Christmas time in 1997, Mason was 20 and Jennifer was 18, and she was finishing up her final year of high school. Both Mason and Jennifer were living at home with Brian and Leslie. The holidays were spent together with extended family, as was the usual practice for the family, and no one could have suspected how very wrong things were about to go. On the afternoon of January 6, 1998, Leslie picked up Brian from the mechanic shop where he had dropped his car off, and they headed towards home together in Leslie's car and talked about the normal stuff that couples talk about at that time of day, probably what's for dinner. Normally, Leslie would arrive home just around 4:30 and Brian would arrive home sometime shortly after 5. But today was a little bit different. Leslie received a phone call on her cell right around 4 p.m. from Mason, just asking when she was going to be home. She told him she was coming home with Brian, and Mason said, okay, and then they hung up. Leslie and Brian arrived home around 5 and the house was dark. They did the normal routine of calling, "We're home," to no answer. Leslie noticed Jennifer's backpack on the floor near the stairs to the basement and a trail of blood on the carpet going from the living room and then down the basement steps. Brian ran down the basement stairs and found Jennifer on the floor, face up, bleeding from what Brian thought was everywhere. But he could tell that she had been shot multiple times. Leslie made a frantic 911 call, which I have heard, but I'm not going to play for you because it's really just heartbreaking and doesn't help tell the story other than to make us all sad and traumatized. The gist of it is Jennifer was sadly found beyond any medical help, and Brian knew it. Paramedics and police arrive, and the attention turns to where's Mason, as he suffered a similar fate, and the house and yard are searched, but there's no Mason. Jennifer had 5 gunshot wounds, 3 in the right side of her head and 2 in the chest. Mason was tracked down about an hour later riding his horse. It's actually not very clear if he was riding the horse away from the scene or if he was just out horseback riding. Either way, he was found alive and well and then taken in for questioning. And right away, the police find Mason a suspect because the story that he told made no sense at all. What he claims is that just after Jennifer arrived home from school, the normal routine is that she would make herself some popcorn and sit in the living room and watch her soap operas. So she was doing that when 4 men pulled into the driveway in a white van and they got out, and 2 of them had weapons but were unspecified what kind of weapons. They kidnapped Mason, who showed no injuries, and one of the men went inside and must have killed Jennifer.
There's no way that ever happened. It was because of me. How do you feel about that? I don't want to go. I don't feel like I want to go on. That's my little sister. There was 4 other people involved. It involved me leaving the house, and one of the people went back into the house. I don't know what happened. 2 of the people were carrying guns on them. I don't know what kind. When they came to the front door, I fired my gun. I didn't hit them. They came upstairs and had nothing left. They took my gun. Do not believe that there was anybody that showed up at your house in a van. What are you trying to say? The story doesn't make sense. What am I trying to say? You're charged with murder. Right. I didn't murder anybody. I got no reason to lie to you. Yes, you do. No, I don't. Sure you do. I don't have any reason. You're for first-degree murder. You have reason to lie. You have motive to lie. I can see that. Yes. Did you hate her that much? No, I didn't hate my sister. Why would I hate my sister? She bent over backwards for me. Yes, she did. She cared more than, ever than anybody. Huh? She had more faith in me than sometimes my parents did. Yep. I got no reason to hate her. I got no reason to blow her fucking head off. I have no reason, whatsoever to do anything like that.
So, yeah, he's not exactly a criminal mastermind. The other issue the police had were a couple of wills that were left on the kitchen table. One was Leslie's and the other was Brian's. Reading, I, Brian D. Jenkins, hereby declare any property or possessions belonging to myself, wholly or jointly, to be left to my spouse, Leslie M. Jenkins, and appoint her the executor of my will. Any outstanding debts shall be dealt with by her, and any money after matters are settled I would like evenly divided between her and the children. If she should pass on in the same time, I leave all property and possession to my son Mason Jenkins and appoint him as the executor. I trust that he will divide any money or property evenly between himself and his sister Jennifer to ensure them both a good future. Only Brian and Leslie admit that they would not and did not write those. What the police felt happened is that Mason was planning on killing his parents as well in his whole plan. So the reason that he dragged Jennifer's body down to the basement was that his mum wouldn't see her when she first came in the house so that he could kill her next. Only when he called, he found out that they were coming home together and he only had a single shot rifle, so it had to be reloaded in between rounds, which is also interesting because Jennifer was shot 5 times, which meant that he had to reload and then load and fire 5 times. Mason was arrested for the first-degree murder of his sister Jennifer. But what's heartbreaking is that Leslie and Brian sided with Mason.
Clearly, we believe at this point that Mason is responsible for Jennifer's death. We wonder why. We believe that Mason is responsible for Jennifer's death.
My perception is that he really truly loved her.
I'm not defending this
No,
gun.
I know.
I'm not, but also too, like he's got the record, but no record of violence.
We're going to yank our people out of there, which means it'll be free and clear for you to go in if you wish. What we're hoping and what we prefer, obviously, is that if you let us go in there and do the cleaning up first before you go in there. Do you have any problem with that?
You haven't done any of this cleanup yet.
No, and that's why we want you in there. I spoke to...
Well, maybe we won't want that.
Okay, that's not a problem.
That was the issue that I was wondering.
Maybe we won't want that.
You won't want us to clean that for you?
That's right.
Okay.
That's our home,
That's true.
and if in fact we get it back at a time and you haven't cleaned anything up, we got a mess to clean up, and we're gonna clean it up. And if we have the choice to do it,
Yeah, that's right.
Perhaps not fully believing him entirely, but not letting their brains and hearts accept any suggestion that Mason shot and killed his sister. Now, put yourself in that position. Your one child is dead and your other child is accused of doing it. Could you pick a side, or would you feel you had to? Mason was convicted of first-degree murder and was sentenced to life with no chance of parole for 25 years, as is the standard in Canada for first-degree murder. And they, as a family, never really talked about it again after that. At first, it was because Brian and Leslie were potential witnesses for the trial, and if you're a witness, you're not allowed to attend the preliminary hearings or the court until your testimony's over. So that was the reason why they didn't talk about it at first. But later, I think they just kind of weren't ready to talk about it, and Mason didn't offer much information. Brian and Leslie continued to visit him in prison and continued to fight alongside him on all of his appeals until John Kastner decided to do a documentary about being the parents of someone serving a life sentence and called it Life with Murder. And I believe you can still find it on Netflix or Prime or one of those streaming services. This was in 2010, and by that time, all of Mason's appeals had been exhausted, so he was stuck with his sentence. And during the filming, he revealed to his prison liaison that, quote, I hate to admit it, but I did think about killing my parents. It seemed like it was the only alternative for money at the time. If I do this, I'll get money and then I'll get the respect and, things will sort themselves out. I planned it. That's why the gun was there. I spent all day with my dad and I couldn't do it. So he did plan on killing his parents as well. However, to this day, he claims that killing his sister was actually just a freak accident and that he didn't want to go ahead with the plan that he had with the murders of his parents or his sister, but that the rifle had accidentally went off when he was trying to put it on a shelf or something, and that he shot her the other 4 times because one, he wanted her moaning like an animal to stop, and two, to make it look like she'd been shot by more than one person and make his story that he had more credible. Both Leslie and Brian have since passed away. Even after his admission, they still didn't want to believe that it was more than an accident.